move on now to cycling and Susie Mitchell, who's here with us tonight, because your sport, it's a bit like tennis, swimming, athletics, triathlon. You do compete on an even stage, and you do compete at the same events. Fiona, you said you had some questions for Susie about individual sport earlier on.
I interrogated her at the table.
you?
We were sitting together. Yeah, I was totally intrigued.
Because Susie, the first thing that you were talking to me outside about was coming back after having a baby and training like to be damned after a C-section and competing 4 months later. And I just wanted to turn around and go home. I felt so inadequate. Because the same thing happened to me, and I think I lay on a bed for about a year.
Yeah, well, I tried track cycling for the first time in New Zealand, and I fell in love with the sport, and I just set my sights then on competing in the World Masters a year later. I had a great plan, and unfortunately there was a bump along the road, which was me getting pregnant. So after a brief moment, I decided I was going to look into my veterinary knowledge and do a bit of research and come up with a plan to train all the way through pregnancy, which I did. And unfortunately then there was another bit of a bump because I had to have an emergency section. So that wasn't part of the plan. So I turned to my animal friends, and I looked at the cows and the dogs and stuff post-cesarean sections jumping around in the fields. So I was like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. So I threw the piece of advice, the 6 weeks, don't do anything for 6 weeks, out the window, and I got back on my bike after about 3 weeks because I decided with a bit more kind of research that most of the wound healing was done by then. So I gave myself the go-ahead and the green light to get back on the bike. And then at 6 weeks, post having the baby, I won a bronze national medal in a track event in Ireland. So I took heart that maybe the hormones were having a good effect. So I went hell for leather and trained hard right to the Masters 4 months later, and then I won the individual pursuit. And I was absolutely delighted. It was like the best feeling I've ever had, just standing on the podium and hearing the Irish national anthem, because I kind of came to sport a bit later in life. So I kind of went straight in at Masters level. And people were like, was having the baby not the best day of your life? And I was like, no, winning the World Masters was the best day of my life. So.
There's definitely something in the water in your building, Michael. First of all, a round of applause for Susie, because that's just insane. Second order of business before we talk again to Susie is just a word on mental health. Brian, you mentioned it and the importance of sport and endorphin release and everything, but also do not think that is normal. It is okay not to be winning medals 6 weeks after you have an emergency section. I had an emergency section. I couldn't drive for about 2 months. I couldn't drive a car. It was too sore. That's phenomenal. That effort is absolutely phenomenal.
I was really lucky because I was so fit. Like I really didn't. I bounced back really quickly. I was really lucky.
It's really unusual, though. Can we just? It's definitely really unusual.
Yes. I was a bit crazy, I have to admit.
But maybe it is something about, I mean, you talked about the discipline and the commitment to study and the hard work, and there's definitely something in that as well, isn't there?
Oh, definitely. But as well, I think like one person gave me a very good piece of advice when I was training and getting back to fitness again post the baby. It's just like, listen to your body, and I think that's like the best piece of advice anyone could give you, and everyone's different. So my body was telling me to go for it, so I did, and it worked out well for me, thankfully. And
were you competing?
The baby was fine as well.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. You had a baby. What's the baby's name? Yeah.
Oh,
you should ask about the baby. Okay, grand. Back to cycling. Did you compete when you were in college, or did you have a support structure here as well? I'm interested to know.
I kind of always stayed in touch with sport, and I used to do a bit of mountain biking, but I never really raced on a bike until I kind of tried track cycling, and I just got a love for the speed, and I really enjoyed it, and I really wanted to race then, but I hadn't actually really raced properly before that. So, okay. But I had stayed in touch with sport all the way through, which can be a challenge at times because it's so busy. It's such a busy degree.
And you went again in 2015. Had you had another baby by then?
No, that was before I had the second baby. So I decided to have one more crack at it in 2015, and I targeted a different event. It was more of an endurance, kind of a tactical event called a points race. I don't expect any of you to know what that was, but basically it's like about 15 minutes, and you sprint every so often for points. And I won that, and I was absolutely thrilled. Now, it couldn't quite top the first time, because the first time just had that whole feeling of, after just having a baby and like proving I could do it. Mm-hmm. But the second time is great as well. But I just felt so lucky to have been able to do it and to have the support at home. In fairness to my husband, who's not here tonight, he was really great. Much as he gave out about it at the time, he really did step up. So.
Have any of you ever been to a major championships in track cycling? Probably no. it's phenomenal. I went last year to the Europeans, and it is, I mean, you think hurling is fast. This is so dangerous, and the velodrome obviously is steep, and it's at an angle, and the bikes, is it the scratch race or the individual pursuit? Which one is the one that is just, they come over the hoarding and they're broken bones everywhere?
That's usually the scratch race.
Scratch race. The scratch race, if you get a chance to Google it, it is the most chaotic race I've ever seen, because they just go round and round and they clump up on each other, and it's terrifying.
Yeah, well, usually you don't there isn't that many accidents, so...
I saw a few and I was there for a day.
Yeah.
Well, but it was the European Championships, so maybe they were going hell for leather. Yeah, there's a bravery element there.
Well, we do have a lot of actually very promising talent, young talent coming up through the system. So I think we could potentially, get Olympic medals within the next, say, 10, 15 years in this sport, if we maybe get an indoor velodrome, which would be a big help.
I was just going to say there was a really strong Irish team, and there is again this year, but they need a velodrome in Ireland, don't they?
Basically, yeah.
In the Republic.
We do have a lovely outdoor velodrome there in Crumlin, and it is really nice, but unfortunately it's weather dependent because it's outdoors and the banking isn't the same. So while a lot of the skills can transfer, it's very hard to compete indoors if you haven't got the practice indoors. So, the site is there and the planning has been approved and everything, so hopefully we'll have a velodrome in the next couple of years in Ireland, and we'll start to see some serious medals coming in. So
I want to say welcome as well to Marika Beltman, who's here, who's you have a microphone. Oh, you're on the ball. Can we turn on Marika's microphone there, please? So, Marika, you have represented Ireland at European level as well. I just want to mark that because, again, that's a huge achievement, and the cross-section of sport in the veterinary department here in UCD is phenomenal. When was it that you were in action?
It's a good question, actually, because it's 3 years in a row. So,
because we had a photograph.
14, 15 and 16.
16.
14 Europeans, 15 Europeans on 3 levels, 16 Europeans in the world.
And for people who don't know you, you're on staff here, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, so do you get to use... It's a bit of a benefit, isn't there, to having that
there is
world-class sports centre, Brian?
Brian and I were joking earlier that we basically... He saw me at 6 o'clock this morning because I was in training, and he seen me again. He was like, I saw you already today. So yes, very lucky that now we have the pool here in UCD and a first-class gym, which basically gives me absolutely no excuse not to train, which I then... do as well. I do take the opportunity to go in, and opening times are really early and late, so there is no excuse not to train.
When you're in a minority sport like that, in an environment where people like Susie are making a name for themselves as well on the world stage, do you kind of look out for each other and try and follow each other's success?
Now it's really funny because I remember Susie as a student, and that sounds like that I'm so old, but that's not it. But
I think I'm older than you are. Actually.
You are. Because that was our discussion when I was an intern, Susie was in the first final year, just two other final years of that year here, which is quite funny. It makes you realise that you're here a while. But of course, I meet Susie because Susie does every now and then dibs in and out of triathlon, and as every good cyclist does actually really, really well at it. But I get old because I have a lot of friends that compete in triathlon and are now of the baby having stage, let's call it that way. And they're all kind of in this, what do we do with the baby, and what do we do, and can we still train, and can we still compete? And I go, you know what, I have this colleague, she's really cool. She became world champion. And you know what, she didn't just become world champion, she also did a triathlon 6 weeks post-cesarean as well. That was her second baby. You forgot to mention that, Susie.
But did you tell them to buy my book?
I did. I always plug your book. I always plug your book, and then I have to plug Maura's book as well. But I plug both your books just to give people the idea, to give it is also not, I know what you're saying, as in it is really hard after having a baby, but in general, I think as you progress through the age groups, you can actually, it's like the saying in us is okay, how do we get better? And basically all of us say, well, all the ones that are better than us, most of them have had a baby, but that's a huge sacrifice to make for the sport, so we're not quite sure whether we want to go that far.
Well, yeah, it's interesting what you're saying there, because I found for my mental health, getting out and training was a huge thing for me, because I was really shocked. When I had the baby, it was like, oh my God, my life is over. I couldn't get over the shock of it. I remember looking out the window at people cycling past thinking, I'll never get on my bike again. I actually felt like that. So for me to actually, when I got back on the bike, even just really easy going at the start, just to get out and get the fresh air and just get away for like an hour, it was so good for mental health. And like for anybody, just to do even a little bit, like, so sport, we're come back to this topic again and again, but it's just so important for mental health, like at any stage, you know.
It's my one saying was that people say, Marika, you must be mad to do this. And I always go, well, you wouldn't want to see me without this because I'll be a lot madder and totally unbearable.
Exactly. I think everybody in the room could probably concur with that. That's how important sport is.